Hello, it's Scott Manley here, back from my holidays, re-entering regular life and, well, re-entering Kerbal's atmosphere with a bang, because today I'm looking at the deadly Reentry plugin. As implemented by MechJeb developer Ramon, we have spacecraft falling through the atmosphere at 4 kilometers per second and not surviving because of the rigors generated by the re-entry. Now I should point out right away, re-entry heat is largely not caused by friction, it is caused by radiative healing due to ram pressure, which is a fancy way of saying we squeeze the air in front of the spacecraft, and as it squeezes it gets heated up, and then the heat makes it glow, which heats up the surface of the spacecraft. And so it is with this implemented in the game in some fashion that I am looking at the reusable space program and whether my reusable launcher would in fact be reusable or whether it would be rendered into a pile of garbage, charred pieces. And so yeah, I started out with one of my standard launchers. This was a separate save file. This isn't actually in the reusable space program because I haven't decided whether I want to use it. You see here, the overheating happens very quickly on those engines and things start to explode even before then. Now, as I understand it, it does, wow, it looks very impressive, it does do re-entry heating based upon the model that the developers use. That means, if you don't know if you remember, but the developers in one of their live streams showed how what they do to model the heating is they essentially use a simulated light to illuminate the model, and the illuminated areas are considered those areas that are being heated. Well, same thing apparently works with this, because you can see the spacecraft at one end is shielded, and the bits that explode are the bits that are near the bottom. So this is me trying various return models, and in this case, I started out with a rather steep trajectory. Now this is a slightly less steep trajectory, and I start tuning around to see if I can make this work somehow. As it turns out, I tried dozens of times to make this spacecraft return, and you can see it does make it through, and yeah, I can deploy this parachute and it will actually return to the planet if I want. Here we go, just accelerating through, and even though it has quite a large amount of mass on it, it does actually survive the parachute opening, and yes, we get more hardware assisted braking here with things exploding all over the place, and Bob Kerman does in fact make it home, because he is a true hero. Oh yeah, the space probe attached there as well. So again, I took another go at this and tweaked my re-entry trajectory somewhat to try and make it more amenable. You see here the orbit which I'm taking is slightly higher up, and in this case I made it high enough up that what happened was I entered into the atmosphere, and around 46 kilometers I actually rose up a little. Now, people have sent me videos of this saying, oh, that's me skipping off the atmosphere. No, they're not skipping off the atmosphere. This is just simply returning into orbit. Skipping actually requires an aerodynamic change, and of course spacecraft use aerodynamics during re-entry to make sure that they stay high up in the atmosphere for longer. See, part of the problem is that all of these re-entries are ballistic, and there's no way for me to control my altitude. So I basically start to fall down. You see here we're trying to decelerate using the RCS jets. That isn't going to help me very much. But yeah, the problem is that as you drop below orbital velocity, you start to fall down towards the planet, accelerate and accelerate. And as you hit the really dense atmosphere, that's when it gets deadly. So real spacecraft actually use the aerodynamic properties of the capsule to try and keep themselves higher up in the atmosphere longer. Some of them actually skip off into higher orbits or higher trajectories and then bounce through more than once. So yeah, to simulate this, and you see this at playing at 4 times or time acceleration, I thought, why not follow this trajectory but use the RCS jets to provide some small amount of vertical thrust. And the idea being that since I can't get aerodynamic lift, I can get lift from the RCS system. So we've now got it back to somewhat near normal speed. And what happens is the the aerodynamics takes over, and because the back of the spacecraft is apparently, I don't know, less aerodynamic, the whole thing wants to point butt first, and everything starts to just fall apart. Also, yeah, parachutes being out don't help, but the parachutes do survive re-entry surprisingly well. The plugin does not have any special treatment for deployed parachutes, so you can deploy them with impunity. But if you are the kind of person that goes out and especially looks for a plugin to cause re-entry damage, I somehow don't think you'll be the kind of person who deploys parachutes just to, get around that particular thing. So anyway, yeah, I adjusted my orbit down a little, and again tried the same thing using the RCS to control and provide some level of thrust. I'm just pointing it upwards at this time. You just see me slipping sideways through the atmosphere at 2.4 kilometers per second. And I moved it down a little, so hopefully there'll be a bit of a plateau due to the orbital velocity, but we want it to be deep enough in that we kill our lateral velocity more quickly. There is a window. If you come in too high, then you slow down and nosedive again, and if you come in too low, then you break up. But there does seem to be a middle value where you fall down into the atmosphere at a somewhat more sedate pace, and I think this is what's going on here. So here I am now. You can see that the vertical velocity meter rose up a little, so now I'm actually thrusting, trying to keep my vertical velocity from dropping too quickly, or my negative vertical velocity, my drop rate, from going too fast. And the idea being simply we are wanting to linger in this atmosphere as long as possible, get rid of as much velocity as we can. We have all the parachutes now deployed. You see they've turned blue here. And so now they will deploy at some point, but not yet. And now I'm really fighting the aerodynamics here, trying to hold it vertical, simply because, I don't know, I guess vertical is easy for me to remember which way is up. So here we dropped the velocity to like 1800 or 1900 meters per second, but now we're down below 33 kilometers. And our vertical velocity is very rapidly going down. And at some point we are going to start seeing re-entry effects, and hopefully before then we will have bled off most of our velocity. 1800 meters per second, and yeah, despite my best efforts, despite the force of the RCS, I'm getting pushed into this rear-facing position. So I start to use the lateral thrust to try and keep my nose up, and there we see the first signs of re-entry happening. 28 kilometers up, 1600 meters per second. We're losing velocity very quickly. And although those parachutes aren't deployed, I suspect they are actually helping me kill my velocity. 25,000 meters, 1400 meters per second. You see that we're really losing velocity much faster. This is because we're using the fuel, and the overheating starts to happen just as the parachutes deploy, and they kill my velocity quickly enough that I actually survive with no damage. But again, this is completely bogus. Those parachutes would be destroyed if they were deployed at this altitude. But this is the only way I could get this thing to re-enter using this deadly re-entry model. And honestly, I don't expect that the developers will do much different from this. There might be some adjustment of heating parameters, but other than that, I see that perhaps the days of the reusable launcher are numbered. So it comes to this, where I want to ask you guys. I've been playing the reusable space program for a while, and this has been my launcher, and I've got a whole lot of stuff going on, and I'm just wondering, do we want to add deadly re-entry and just get away from the whole idea of reusable spacecraft? Because, we haven't really been showing launches much recently. We've been mostly showing, the stuff as it happens afterwards. And the limits on this, if I have to make it return, I don't know how I can do it. Actually, I know how I can do it. I can use parachutes, but that's stupid. So yeah, we have the option. We could include deadly re-entry and start building different kinds of launch vehicles, and that might be fun. Or we can stick with 100% reusable and just say no to re-entry heating. We want to be as stock as possible. So yeah, tell us what you think, and maybe we'll decide. And yes, of course, he is going down on a single shoot, but he is able to make it to the ground a little faster. He looks up and hopes that that does not land upon him. 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, and he lands all in one piece. And the rest of the spacecraft is coming down in just a moment. There it is, look, intact, ready to be recovered, with only a slight blemish on its conscience as it decides that it really felt that deploying parachutes at re-entry heat speeds were a little cheaty. So I did try this again using the same re-entry profile, seeing, maybe I can get away using just RCS. Maybe it was the RCS that did it. And so I do my best. I work very hard with the RCS. So you see it flipping up and flipping around, and re-entry's happening, and my velocity is not dropping nearly as quickly. And in fact, as you see, it's 1400, 1430, 1420, and the heating on the parachutes and the engine starts. Oh dear! And something else just starts exploding. Bits start exploding. And yeah, this isn't going to work out for the best. I do like the way bits break off, actually. It's pretty darn cool to watch these things disintegrating. Ah, yes. Oh, and there's the decoupler going. Oh, what's that? Actually, no, it wasn't the decoupler. There was a probe body that broke. The decoupler, or not the decoupler, the docking node was just fine. So at least Bob can escape with some dignity. But yes, I don't think I can make this work without re-entry, with parachutes, because that would be cheating. What I really need is a giant inflatable re-entry system, right? A heat shield I can put over my engines. Now, it does come with a bunch of heat shields, including this 5.6 meter, or it's a 6.25 meter heat shield. It's like a super-sized mushroom growing on top of this. Now, I can't put it at the bottom because that's where the engines are. The engines need to fire, but I thought maybe I can stick this underneath the docking port. And the idea being, if I'm very careful, and very careful means using mech jeb, I can keep it pointed head on into the airstream and perhaps protect those things. Now, it isn't big enough to protect everything, and you'll see stuff getting exposed to it, but maybe this can bear the brunt of the force. Now, the only problem is, I'm using a lot of RCS to keep this thing pointed, and if I deviate too much, then the aerodynamics want to make this whole thing flip around, because I guess the drag on this heat shield is pretty high. That will basically mean that if you have this on as a heat shield, it will want to flip around to the back, and that's been my experience, that having the inflatable heat shields on, the spacecraft tends to want to flip around with those at the back. So they're not the best heat shields, unfortunately. As cool as the whole part is, I love the idea of an inflatable heat shield of this size. But yeah, look, I just have MechJeb holding it for me, because I tried this a few times, and as soon as you get pushed too far out, the aerodynamics takes over and you flip around the other way and everything starts to explode. And indeed, that's what's going to happen momentarily. Now, you can see some flaming on the front of this thing, but most of it's on the exposed legs and things like that. Unfortunately, you can't see how hot they are. And there we go. Yes, even MechJeb can't hold it in that position. And there's a bit of rotation going on. Rotation actually helps because it distributes the heat a little. But there's only so much you can do. For example, you can't really get that large engine out of the airflow at all. And, well, at this point, what's happened is that the velocity has actually dropped quite a lot. And I think that is almost entirely down to the heat shield grabbing the air. I haven't looked at the parameters of these things, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has a much higher wind resistance than the rest of the spacecraft. But look, it comes down, nothing has exploded. I'm just not sure I can make this work. That's my main thing. Because of the needs for precise control, holding it head on, I think this may not work. It'd be nice to have some sort of heat shield that I could eject, push down on robotics out of the bottom and have it appear, but I couldn't, maybe there's a way to do that. Maybe I can have a heat shield that folds around the back. Or maybe, hey modders, maybe we can have some engines that have cowlings that fold over them to protect them for re-entry. There we go, coming down. Look at that. Oh yes, and there's the capsule with the Bob on board that was ejected earlier, landing 23 kilometers away and coming down. And where are we? I wonder which one will land first. Oh yes, yes. Well, that's a separate problem. I managed to fix the re-entry problem, but have reintroduced the breaking things in half problem. Oh dear. That's not... that's not an ideal situation. Yeah. So as I said, given the problems I'm having, I'm thinking it's an either or. Either we have re-entry damage, or we have reusability. And I can obviously endeavour to get things as reusable as possible, but I think 100% and reusing this launcher isn't going to happen anymore. Also, note that because this thing fell apart, during the vertical descent, that the rest of the spacecraft lands on top of it, with hilarious effects. So yes, I bet you thought it was going to come down and we just glue those two parts back together again. No. The whole thing just gets crushed under, falling pieces. But we do have a rather nice mushroom sculpture left here. Oh, modern art. Anyway, yes. We've spent enough time looking at practical applications of re-entry damage. Let's do something purely for the aesthetics. So yes, Goon Station 1 once more. I know we've already destroyed this a couple of times. But this time, we're going to try and use some of the escape spacecraft. You see that we're already falling through the atmosphere, and there's been a mad rush to the escape spacecraft, which are obviously sliding their way between things. We have Jeb taking his space plane out, and well, he's going to try and land that, and we're obviously going to fold away these solar panels. Now, because I installed Romfairer's Buran manipulators, he has robot manipulators for the space shuttle and the Buran. That means that we have this extended load distance, which is really nice because it means I can turn on ASAS for the space plane, and it will hold that attitude while everything else is going to disintegrate. So I'm just going to set this thing up and leave it, and it won't unload. It won't have the 2.5 kilometer limit. I've heard there are bugs with this, but I haven't encountered them, and frankly, this is great because it means that I can actually follow all my spacecraft. So now everything is detached that has parachutes. All that's left is the rest, is the Goon Station, the core with, but a dozen Kerbals left with no way home. So they will obviously be, well, actually it only shows 3 of them there. That isn't so bad. Although there is that one guy hanging onto the outside doing a science experiment. As it turns out, Kerbals in space are surprisingly robust to re-entry heating. Unlike human beings, of course. And so here we are, falling through the atmosphere. Oh yeah, so I noticed today that Spaceship 2 did a drop test. There's an awesome photo out on the internet showing it flying in front of the moon. There we go, it's grinding to a halt as the processor is working very hard with those re-entry effects. No. How is it going to... Oh, things exploding. Obviously, explosions fly with the spacecraft. That probably needs to be changed at some point. Explosions should fly with the spacecraft in space, but when they're in the atmosphere, they should probably be entities that have a relatively high air resistance, so that they fly away. Oh! Bits just explode. I have no idea what's exploding, but it does look rather cool. There's just like all sorts of things, and things actually break off. That's kind of cool. So the spacecraft is disintegrating due to the damage. Unlike with FAR, with the Ferrum version, it was literally getting torn apart by the air. In this case, the heating is destroying pieces, and it's losing, and some of those pieces are structurally important. We're down to like 1400 meters per second in the atmosphere. It doesn't look that impressive, the heating effects, but you can see that they're having a huge effect. Oh yes, something broke off that stopped instantly. Oh, look! I'm doing a science experiment! Oh, and exploding. And we have one of the escape pods, another escape pod, another escape pod. And we have Jebediah! And we have an escape spacecraft and bits of things that we'll take care of. Oh, batteries. More bits. Oh, ion engines. Ion engines seem to be doing pretty well. Although the whole artificial gravity thing is still up there. Oh, look, a pod has survived so far. Oh, yeah, we have one Kerman still alive on that. Not for long. Yes, okay, what are we looking for? What are we looking for? Yeah, we should start deploying parachutes soon. Once we get down below sane velocities. Yes, deploy parachute, deploy, deploy! You are free to land! And now it is up to Jebediah to try and land this thing. Now, most of you probably haven't flown this, including the designer, because this thing is ridiculously nose heavy. It wants to just nosedive the whole time, but it is powered by this ring of radial engines, so if you only turn on the bottom engines, then it actually gives you torque that allows you to lift up the nose. So I'm going to try and balance this thing out. You see me throttling it up, and that lifts the nose. So there's a balance. I've got to try and do this long enough that I don't nosedive into the ground, but I don't want to do it too long and run out of fuel. Furthermore, I don't want to end up running I don't want to end up flying too fast when I land. And so look, we have lights coming up. We have, of course, the landing lights, and so I start thrusting this up, and I'm using 100% thrust, but you see I'm adjusting the thrust up and down to try and keep my vertical speed. If I do it too much, then I might run out of fuel before I get down to the ground. It's pretty good, actually, 72, 71 meters per second. I'm not sure how well this thing is going to land. Now, I'm just using ASAS to hold my attitude here, and obviously I'm landing on a hillside, so even though my vertical speed shows 0, I'm gonna get close to the ground and touch, and things exploded. Awesome! Oh no, damn. Oh, Jebediah, when will we see your like again? I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.